What is up, guys? Theocletian here. Just headed back from the store and wanted to continue our little conversation on playing God with genetic modification in humans, right? And where that's headed. So really quickly, I bought these gloves. These are pretty much snowboarding gloves, but I'm gonna give them a try for the ride home. They have two different layers, so that'd be interesting. And yeah, it is cold as hell out here. And quick comment, cold as hell. You guys might be thinking like, oh man, that's such a stupid phrase. Where does that come from, right? But during the Renaissance period, of course, hell was thought of as a really frigid place, right? As the characterization of being apart from God, that separation from God, right? Instead of having a fiery lake of doom and whatnot, it was a frozen lake of woe and solace, and characterized by the Blue Devil. Any Duke fans out there would be familiar with that. But enough rambling. Alright, getting back into the topic at hand. So we left off with discussing kind of what is artificial and what's natural, and that's kind of an important precursor to the wider conversation here. Is just what exactly is ethical when it comes to genetic modifications, right? Because on one hand, you know, now we have the technology to do genetic screening at the very least, right? So you can screen both parents for potential problems, especially when it comes to autosomal dominant / recessive diseases, especially the recessive ones, right? Like I can't really think of any right now. Like Tay-Sachs disease. I just said that really loudly as that lady was walking by. I don't think she really cared. But like Tay-Sachs disease or cystic fibrosis, something like that, right? So I guess let's start with the genetic screening aspect of it. Because that technology is more or less there. I guess it's a little cumbersome, maybe a little expensive. Not really sure, haven't looked into it. But for those people who have a genetic disorder or who suspect that they're at risk of being a carrier, that's something that they might want to look into, right? And fair enough. It's not a moral judgment by any means. It's just more information, right? But I think the tricky part comes with when you get that information, what do you really do with it, right? So a few things. Definitely there are a lot of people out there who don't want to know. Even if they know that they're a carrier or if they actually have the disorder, they don't really want to know what's exactly going to go on in terms of, like, you know, the probability their offspring will have that same disorder, right? And that's fair enough. I mean, on the surface it kind of seems like the logical, natural thing, right? To kind of just feign ignorance. But obviously this type of mentality can't be applied across the board. I'm not trying to say, obviously it's an individual decision, right? And but across the board you can't use that reasoning. It's like having a murderer in your house and the cops coming by and asking where this guy is, and you saying, oh well, you know, I don't know, I don't want to know, don't ask me. So doesn't really hold up all that well. If you guys are wondering what the hell I'm doing with my hands, it's pretty clear I don't know either. I'm just trying to get these like threads to go without like flailing around. Now let's think about a situation where an individual finds out that they and their partner both have both are carriers for some type of recessive disorder, right? And based off of this information, this individual decides to not pursue the relationship or to not have kids, right? And a lot of people might be thinking like, wow, that's kind of cold. Obviously, it's highly unlikely that someone would just come to this conclusion based off this one thing, even if it's a fairly debilitating disease. But on the other hand, I think it's interesting if you compare it to kind of what people do normally, like without the genetic information. When people are attracted to each other physically, they look for very superficial stuff that's supposed to be an indicator of genetic virility and integrity, right? For example, a lot of girls are attracted to cleft chins, right? and they think that it's kind of a symbol of genetic integrity, virility, whatever. But in reality, it's actually a congenital defect when the jaw bones don't fuse properly. So it's kind of interesting. On one hand, society, it's like, yeah, you can make these superficial judgments about a person's genetic health, but when it comes down to actually analyzing their DNA and stuff like that, all of a sudden, it's a different ball game. And it makes sense to a degree. So the point I'm trying to drive home is, I'll give an extreme example of the unpopular side of the argument, which is that if you imagine a future state where, let's say a future Match.com, right, where two people come in, they give their samples, their DNA samples, and they're matched up based off of their genetic disposition in order to maximize the fitness level of their offspring, right, in various categories. And right away, people are like, whoa, that is definitely playing God. That is not natural. That's not how nature intended things to happen. That's unethical. But let me get started here. But the point here that some people want to make is that that's really no different than what humans have been doing since the 2 million years we've been around. I mean, the only difference is, up until this point, been using superficial physical stuff to select partners. And even stuff like weight, height, symmetry of the face, all of that is still pointing to genetic health, ultimately. And so these guys are saying, why not go to the source, right? Why not look at the genes themselves? I think it's probably more the fact that at this point in time, most people aren't comfortable with that. Woo. And there's that tendency to think that things we're not comfortable with as being unnatural, clearly unnatural, rather than kind of the progression of things, right? It's like the branch thing. It's just a natural progression from something that's completely natural to something that's more influenced by mankind, right? My last point here is just that I think when it comes to things like genetic testing, where some people are saying, oh, that's definitely playing God, I think that's actually more of a result of the anxiety around the potential of abuse of this particular thing, right? It is powerful, for sure, the potential of abuse for genetic testing, but we have to understand that it's a logical fallacy to assume that just because there's a potential of misusing a thing, that the value of that thing is directly impacted, right? And an easy example would just be anesthetics, right? Pain relievers, especially. They have an ethical intended purpose, right, to minimize the pain for patients, but they could be abused by people who are using drugs. But that doesn't mean that the painkillers themselves have some type of negative ethical value to it. And so I won't make this video too long. In my next video, I'll talk really quickly about actual human genetic modification, gene therapy, what's going on now, and then the future of human genetic modification. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for future videos.